So yeah, I'm a Muslim. My name is Hashim. I believe in the oneness of God. He's unique. He's got certain attributes which are unique as well, like he's all-knowing, he's omnipotent, and he neither begets nor is he begotten. He's the one on which everyone depends on, but nobody depends on him. Sorry, he doesn't depend on anyone. Yeah.
What does it mean? He neither begets nor is begotten.
What that means is that he has no parents and no children. He's independent and he's unique. And like I said, he's as-samad, which means everyone depends on him, he depends on none. Yeah. Tell me about yourself. What's your name and what is your belief? What's your ideology? So we can understand and then maybe carry on from there.
My name is Juliet, and my belief is that all religions are pointing to the same thing in different ways, and they have many different stories and aspects that reflect truth in different ways.
Okay.
If they are from the heart, there can be different things where if there is a section of belief that is just to get some power for someone, then it is not real. But a religion that is worthy of the names, that comes from something genuine and true,
Right.
then there are many different aspects. And actually this is shown by the fact that there is not a Christian tree and a Muslim tree, and there's not a Christian sun and a Muslim sun and a Jewish sun and a Hindu sun. There is the sun.
Yeah.
It is that.
That's an interesting point. I will actually respectfully disagree with that. I'll tell you why. The term Muslim, do you know what it means?
Submitted to God.
Exactly. Does in nature everything submit to God?
I think that so, yes.
So they're all Muslim by that definition.
Ah,
You see what I mean?
it's like this is about words more than the actual looking at things, and it can be very easy to play with words and say, for example, if I say this is the savior and I use these words, then I can say, well, it's the savior. It says savior.
Yeah.
It means to save.
Yeah.
But I use this word afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you use it.
Whether, for example, whether I understand the word Muslim or not, if I am a rabbit or a plant or a bird.
Yeah, I totally agree with
the
you.
sun is there.
Yeah. So even though you're saying if the son doesn't understand this language, the point remains submission to God, which means you do the will of God. So for example, the sun has a purpose. It's just doing that purpose for which it has been created by God. See what I mean? Just like you and I also been created by God. But unlike the sun, we have been given a special gift called the gift of free will, where you can either choose to obey or disobey. You're not forced to do whatever you're doing in this world. There are many people in this world who reject God. Many people in the world who worship nature only. Many people in the world who worship multiple gods. So this understanding that all of us are on the same path, it's kind of, if you look at it holistically, it's not the case, because if you look at, for example, I'll give you an example about Judaism, Christianity and Islam. All of them, they see Jesus in a different way. Yes, you're aware of that, right? So for example, the Jews, they reject him as a prophet or a Messiah or anything basically important in their religion, in their teachings. The Christians, on the other hand, they go to the other extreme. They worship him as God. So he's one with God, and he's co-eternal with him, and he's co-equal with him. This is their belief of Christianity. And the Muslims neither reject him nor raise him to the level of God. We take the middle ground. Obviously, he's one of the mightiest messengers. He is the Messiah in Islam, and he's the one that we respect and revere as a prophet of God. However, we do not equate him to God. Remember that passage I told you in the Quran, in Surah by the way, I didn't mention the ayah. So it's actually in Surah Al-Ikhlas, which is 112th chapter of the Quran. And it says, Lam yalid wa lam yulad, which means he neither begets nor is begotten. So he cannot be the son of God. We don't raise him to that standard either. Because the whole understanding of God being unique and independent means he needs neither a son, nor a daughter, nor a father or a mother.
So for me, again, because of this holistic understanding, I feel, okay, so Muslims prefer, he's a messenger, they find God different way. The Christians prefer, they take this person to represent like a manifestation of God through which they can find God. In a way, if they find God at the end, then it doesn't matter. It's like it's a finger that's pointing, and and if you confuse, this is from Buddhist teaching. They say the finger is not the moon. If you confuse the finger pointing with the moon, then you're very confused. But all of them are just trying to get you to be exactly in connection with
whom?
truth.
With whom? Connection with whom?
With truth.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Everyone has their own understanding of what the truth is. It's subjective for them. For example, for us, a human can never be God. For the Hindus, they can incarnate as God. For the Christians, God can incarnate as a man. So when you say the truth, this is subjective. Everyone from their own relative perspective and their teachings from their theology, they will identify God as different. So you cannot say all of them lead to God, because all of them lead to different gods, not the same God.
What I mean by God, okay, then.
Yeah, let's start with that.
There's
Good
one
idea.
way that God for me is what moves us all.
What does that mean? Can you elaborate, please?
It means what has no beginning and no end.
Okay, I agree with that totally.
So how to get to that? It has to be there even when we die.
Yeah.
So when I die, many things die with me, my nose, etc. But the qualities that are in this being, they continue. So
You mean your soul?
I mean, if I die, love does not die.
How do you know that?
Because
Whom are you showing love to when you're dead?
what I mean by that is...
Oh, you mean love as in the world? Okay,
So
I get
I
it.
have observed people that I love, they have died, but the qualities that are present, they do not just go because one person goes.
Yeah.
And actually,
But we are conflating two things now.
most religious teachings
Yeah.
try and point you toward these qualities. As we were walking here, you told me your name means generosity. And that is one of the qualities, like a path that leads to God. There are many qualities that are required, and they are required in their purity and their perfection to lead to God.
But I think we kind of talking different, even though we're using the same terms, we might be talking cross purposes. Because when you say your love, that is predicated to you as an individual. Is your love and the love of, say, have you got a pet? Do you have a pet?
I prefer not to.
You prefer not to pet. Good thing actually, because they need the independence too. So people, let's say your mother, okay?
Yes.
The love that your mother shows you and the love that you show to your mother, it's not the same, right?
No.
Yeah, so you individually,
Okay, and two answers, yes and no.
yeah, but that's a contradiction.
Okay, in one aspect, it's the same because love is just love.
Define love.
Wanting the happiness of the health and happiness and balance of whatever you care for, you love, more than you want it for just yourself as an individual.
That sounds more like empathy than love.
What would you say love is?
Love is affection. Simple as that. So you can show affection to if you have a husband, you can show him affection. Now that affection will be different to you showing your love and affection to your mom, isn't it? So like I said, you can use the same terms, but relatively, because it's something which is coming from your own self, it's going to be subjective. How you express love with your mother and with your husband and with your children is going to be different. Remember, it's the same love we are using,
So I
the term.
agree with the expression.
Yeah.
This is maybe the distinction. The expression of love will be different, but the essence of what love is, and that's why we can use the word love and understand that a mother's love
Exactly.
is
It's all affection.
It's
I
the
totally
same.
agree. But like I said, the way you express it, which is very beautifully put, I totally agree with you, is different. Now, when you're talking about God, it's the same thing. When you talk about God, for example, someone who says that God became a man, for the Muslims, that's blasphemous. That is something which the religion says is part of something. You have done the most heinous sin by saying that. The reason for that is because once God becomes a man, then he takes on all the weaknesses of a man. He's no longer the attributes of his true essence. See what I mean? And to me, God is someone who does not change. Because if he changes, then where is the consistency? Where is the, he's a necessary being. And a necessary being doesn't change, you know.
And yet, like, so the thing is, I think, again, I'm not necessarily sure how helpful focusing on the distinctions between different systems of belief as a way to make our system of belief the best one is to spiritual fulfillment. This is my feeling. But if you were to compare these two ways of thinking, one of them, you can see it metaphorically as well. And one of them is trying to see God in the matter, trying to see God everywhere around.
Sorry, in the matter.
In matter.
Okay. Why would you do that?
Because,
do you think God is material?
well, what are you made of?
No, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about God.
No, I know, but
That's why God is unique. If
know.
he's like me, then he wouldn't be unique, would he?
No, I mean, I even struggle with calling it he because I think that that is a limitation of its own.
Absolutely. You know, in Arabic, the term he, the reason it's applied to God is because there's no it in Arabic. So there's no neutral pronoun like it in English. And that's the reason, because gender doesn't apply to God. I completely agree with you, and that is actually the teaching of Islam.
How would you say truth in Islam, in Arabic? How would you say truth? Is there a word for
Truth?
like when you try and say truth in a sentence, but you don't say truth?
Al-Haq, the truth.
Yes, and
Yeah.
then if I said,
And that's one of his name, you know, Al-Haq. There you go.
and if
One of his name is Al-Wadud, means he's the most loving. So you see, these are the different attributes of God.
and the most merciful.
And the most Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. So all of these are his beautiful names and attributes which we see in the Quran. Allah says he calls it as Asma'ul Husna, the most beautiful names. And this is how we understand God. We recognize him with these attributes. So for example, you know, you mentioned truth at the very beginning. This is key. When you talk about theology, when you talk about God, when you talk about religion, when you even talk about morality, the term truth is central to all of this. But you see, one thing which I will never say applies to truth is contradiction. Truth is free from contradiction. Would you agree with that statement?
I question because sometimes we have mixed emotions, for example. So in one moment, you might really want to help somebody and you might be really in a rush, you don't want to help them.
Yeah.
And these two things arise exactly the same time. I want to help this person and I don't want to help this person, I want to get to my meeting.
Yeah.
That's exactly the same time they are true.
No, it's not about truth. What you're talking about is your priorities now, which is very different from the truth. So what you have done there is you're struggling between what is high priority and what is less priority. You see what I mean? That's nothing to do with the truth. Truth is something like, for example, if I say someone is, I don't know, let's say a good person. Yes? He can also have qualities which are bad. But if he's generally good, then you say he's a good person. But you can never say that God is bad. Because God, his standards are always perfect and absolute in the sense that when he says that he is good, and when he says he's the truth, and when he says he's merciful, you cannot have a contradictory attribute to that. So for example, if you say God is good, God cannot be evil. Can he?
Well, what I'm wondering is that someone could say, why is evil committed by something that is completely good and has all power?
Define evil in that context. Are you talking about like landslides, earthquakes, tsunamis? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm talking about when somebody purposefully hurts somebody that is maybe weaker than them, for example.
No, but are you talking in context of God or humans or his creation? Because they're two different things, aren't they? You can't associate evil with God.
Would be allowed everything that would happen. If you say, I don't know, but if you say that, you can say that you don't say this, you can contradict me here. If you say that God is all powerful and can change anything, right, of our behaviors and what we are even, then how is it that he would allow this, for example, this free will thing, so that then humans can be so horrible to each other sometimes, really very horrible?
Very good question, actually. Very good question. This comes from the problem of evil. Now, when we talk about evil, the horrible things that people do to each other, that is their free will acting and their choice. So God is not telling them to do the evil, God is telling them the exact opposite. Okay? So for example, there is a passage in the Quran in chapter 5 verse 32. Allah says, if you kill one man unjustly, then it is as if you have killed the whole of mankind. And if you save one person, it is as if you have saved the whole of mankind. Now you see, God is giving you something we call the good morals. Yeah, He's telling you to obey Him with these good morals. So this is a paradigm you're supposed to work in. However, as human beings, He doesn't tell us that. He doesn't say, like the way we program robots and AI to say what they want. Yes, this is a program.
I prefer not to.
Yeah, you can record from the back if you want. That's fine. Yeah. So the robots are instructed to do as and they cannot deviate from that. They cannot deviate from that script. They still have to work from that paradigm. The human beings can either disobey or obey God. They have that freedom of choice. So when they are going at war, it is them exercising this freedom. Does God tell them to go to war with each other? No, God tells you that yes, there are certain times when, brother, that's distracting for her. Maybe just go a bit back. Yeah, is it okay? Yeah, no problem. So, where was I? Yeah. So when there are certain times when force is required and necessary. Yes, I don't know if you believe in the just war theory. There are certain times when war is necessary. For example, if there is a smaller nation which is being oppressed and taken over by a stronger nation, then we say that in that case, other stronger nations should help that weaker nation because it has been unjustly oppressed and violence has been committed against the people. Yes, so this is something that we see even today. Take the example of Gaza today.
But in every war, then there will always be someone who will say that their violence is justified.
Yeah, if they say it themselves, then that is subjective. But if you collectively say, for example, if the world collectively says that a certain group of people need to be annihilated, then that would be committing a genocide. And this is something we as human beings cannot accept as being right. Doesn't matter what they say. They can say what they want. But you see, the morals which we get from is from the Quran as we take our injunctions from there. So if somebody says it's okay to genocide, the Quran is telling you, no, that is wrong, then I go with the Quran.
In you as well is saying, no, that is wrong.
Exactly. This is called the fitrah. This is called your natural disposition, because you as a human being, you look like a person who is generous, kind, good overall, but you have this innate nature of yours, which tells you when something is right or something is wrong. This is inbuilt in every one of us. Only certain times when you keep doing that evil, keep doing something bad, keep even a bad habit, for example, smoking or drinking, initially you will feel bad. When you started drinking, I don't know about you, but there are people when they started drinking, initially, they felt bad. When they started smoke, they felt guilty. Yes? But once they get into that habit and they become addicted to it, that guilt goes away. Similarly, there are people out there who commit atrocities, and this is a repeat offense. You see many times repeat rapists. They've been to jail, they had all that punishment, they come out of jail and do the same thing again. Because you have become now immune to that, which we have this innate nature of differentiating between good and bad. They've become immune to that because their heart has become blackened. It's become hard.
Called again?
It's called fitrah, the innate nature. But actual fitrah means you will steer towards belief in the oneness of God. So even if you're a child, they've conducted experiments with children, who have been not indoctrinated by the society. They steer towards belief in one God. And there are studies about this from, I believe, from Cambridge or Oxford, where they have conducted this kind of experiments. So I think we
talking about truth.
Yeah.
And we said
truth is free from contradiction. I want to get back to that. Yeah.
And
what would you say to that statement?
well, I'm wondering because there are many aspects to God, but I would say I'm highlighting two main.
Okay, go on.
One of them is that God is extremely impersonal. It is just it is just
He doesn't
there.
care?
It's just there.
Are you saying God doesn't care?
Wait.
Yeah.
So on one level, it's just what is. It's just the reality of everything that it is as it is, and there's not you know, like when you look sometimes at the stars and you see it's so big and you're so small, you can notice just how small you know. In the Quran, they have something with the ring, and you put the ring in the desert. And,
Oh, very nice. You heard that hadith, mashallah. I'm impressed actually.
Well, it's only
Alhamdulillah.
because someone come to me and talked to me.
Yeah, that's good.
So,
that's
and
good.
then in that, and so this is trying to show how just infinite God is. So it's so
Vast, yeah.
so vast
Yeah.
that it's not worried about my shoelaces on one level. Yes, it's not worried about this. And then the other side of it.
Sorry, is it okay if you step a bit back, because I think they don't want to record you, they want to record me.
The only side.
Because you said not to, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
The only side of it.
Yeah.
That's something that I'd be very happy to talk about, by the way. But the about why I'm not being recorded. Well, why I prefer not to be recorded.
That's fine.
But the other side of it is that it's incredibly personal in that you, when you are praying, and anyone when they are praying, can have a direct relationship to God straight away like that. So at the same time, it is vast, like we cannot understand vast. And absolute, and at the same time, it is exactly personal just to me.
Okay. I see a clear contradiction in that. And I think you do as well. That's why you brought this point up, isn't it? If God is not personal, and He's impersonal, and He's distant, and He doesn't care what's happening in the world, does He love you? You talked about love earlier. Does He love you?
Well, that's the thing, is that I think there is a type of love that is to just let things be.
No, that's not love. I'm sorry. If you think let things be, so if somebody's suffering, let it be. Let him suffer.
There is one way, in a way, this is represented on earth currently, in that God does just not come and stop a war.
No, hold on. See, again, we are conflating two different things. One is being distant. You don't care at all what's happening in the world. Another is Him not interfering in the affairs of human beings until He wills.
Okay.
So God, look, God has a will. His will presides over all of us. Everything that we do, it is because of the will of Allah. You see this leaves moving? Not a single leaf will move unless Allah wills it. Yes? So He still allows it. However, if He wanted, He could have stopped it, if He wanted. Yes? But, you see, when you said God is distant and God doesn't care what's happening in the world, I don't think that's true.
But okay, but at the same time, I said it was personal and it very much cares. I changed my words because, again, it's words is the problem, not really the...
Consistency is what we need.
So
Yeah.
it's interference and non-interference, let's say.
Yeah, that's a different aspect.
And then, but
Yes.
then these two things arise at the same exact time. In truth, that truth is that's one of the names of God, you said. So I call it.
Al-Haq, yeah.
So in truth, there is interference comes up, and there is non-interference comes up simultaneously.
But that's got nothing to do with the truth of God's truth. God, of course, what He says is the truth. What He does is the truth. However, if He kept interfering, let me give you an analogy. Maybe you'll understand better. Okay, with the analogy, because I like analogies. They put complex things into simpler form for everyone to understand. You've been to school. You sat at a test or an examination, right? Your whole year you spent, and this is your final exam. This is a decision that's going to be made based on your hard work, based on the result of your examination, whether you go to the next class or you graduate or not. Yes? Would you expect your teacher to interfere when you're doing something right or wrong? Why is that?
Because otherwise it wouldn't be from my work.
It wouldn't be a test. See what I mean? It wouldn't be your test. The whole idea of giving you a test is to see your ability and your capacity as to where you stand in comparison to the other students. Yeah, that is the reason for the test, and that you graduate to the next level if you pass. If you fail, then you continue with the test or whatever it is, yeah, however, whatever the process is of the school. If God interfered at every single aspect of our life, let's say you're doing something wrong, immediately, boom, comes the result of whatever you do. So if somebody, let's say, murders, lightning bolt, he collapses and he dies. Now, that wouldn't be something which God would do. Yes, He wouldn't interfere at every aspect of your life, because it would then negate the purpose of this test. By the way, us in this world, we are in a big test until we die. Every day of our life is a test. What is God testing you? Whether you're abiding by His injunctions, whether you're abiding by His recommendations, by the sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him. All of this is something that we are being tested on. For example, in Islam, if you go to bed with a full stomach and your neighbor, even if your neighbor is an atheist who doesn't believe in God or might be a Hindu, if he goes to sleep empty stomach and you go to sleep with a full stomach, you're not from the deen, you're not a Muslim. That is the injunction of Allah, because Allah is not only saying be nice to yourself and your fellow Muslims or something, He's saying be nice to everyone. If there's something in the road that's blocking the path, you move that and you'll get hasanat for that. You'll get rewarded for that. If you feed your neighbor who is hungry, you get rewarded for that. Every single aspect of our life, we get rewarded for it. But what I was coming to with regards to the contradiction in the truth is that when people have different religions and they see God as different ways, yes, we see clear contradictions. If everyone saw the same thing, then we would be one religion, wouldn't we? The fact that we have different religions is because we consider, when I say we, the human beings consider God with in different ways based on their ideology or perspective.
But it's like there's different languages, there's different cultures, as if
Yes.
it would be so boring and not rich if we made everyone speak the same language.
Yeah, but that's not true.
First of all, if we made everyone have the same cultural customs and everything, it would be
Boring,
like
yeah.
having one flower instead of having all these different types of flowers.
That's right.
So we have
Yeah.
in the beliefs, we have all these different types of flowers.
Yeah.
And as long as they lead to the qualities of generosity, of purity, of love, of of sharing with your neighbor, of patience, of transcendental knowledge, as long as they lead to, I don't know, whatever humility, there are lots of, as long as they lead to godly qualities, as long as they lead to you living a life where you are in line with like spirit or what moves us or infinite love, then they are welcome. If we make it all, imagine we say, and I think that actually the English tried to do this when they, in the past, they colonized. I wasn't alive, but they colonized lots of the world.
Not just the English.
You should be like us.
Not just English.
No, also-
The Europeans.
Yeah,
I know you're from France.
Yes.
Maybe you don't like the English,
Also
but it
the-
wasn't just the English, trust
No,
me.
also the
It was the Europeans, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish.
Ah.
Yeah, all these were
And you
culprit
said we
to
are
that. Yeah.
right. They
Yeah.
were, and
They were not right.
and this was.
They
sorry,
claimed
no.
to be. Yeah, they
Sorry.
claimed to be right, but they were not right.
You said all was culprit, and I said they were culprit.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes. So they all said we have the right way. They did not.
They did not, yeah.
They say we have the right way, and we're going to show you the right way.
Yeah.
What a sad life.
They wanted to make them like themselves. But they look down upon people just because they are a different skin tone.
And
Yeah.
because different beliefs.
And different beliefs and different languages and different, yes. But you see, in Islam, we don't have that, fortunately, unlike what you are, I don't know, what you're thinking about. Islam never discourages your culture. You see, I come from Asia. I still eat Asian food. Doesn't make me a non-Muslim. I don't need to eat Arab food to become a Muslim. I enjoy Arab food and I enjoy Asian food and I enjoy different cuisines. Not much of French, maybe. I don't know. I don't like the snails, trust me. So, escargot, what do you call it?
Escargot.
Escargot, sorry. I remember slightly what the name is. So, yeah, Islam doesn't discourage you as long as you're not going against God. For example, if the English dine on pork, for us, pork is haram. It's something that is something that we don't do. So, as long as it doesn't go against the religion, as long as you're not going against the Quran and the Sunnah, then it's fine. Enjoy your culture. You see, I don't know if you've seen the Hajj recently. You know, the pilgrimage which happens every year in this month of Zul Hijjah. You see people from all different backgrounds, all different colors, all different cultures and languages, united in one place, wearing the same clothes, to show the unity. But they still have different colors, different languages, different cultures. And this is the beauty, Islam unites it. Without taking away your culture, it unites you in a single unit as Muslims. Not that it's going to say, okay, you're not an Arab, you're not a Muslim. No, in fact, the Arabs are actually a minority. Do you know that? Amongst the Muslims. They are only 20%. The majority are non-Arabs. Yes, 80% of Muslims are non-Arabs, or even more.
And this diversity is wonderful.
It's something which is celebrated in Islam. The diversity is celebrated. The only thing which is not celebrated if you go against the injunctions of the Quran and Sunnah.
So you talked, for example, about eating the pig. And
Yeah.
for me, very
Pork. We
important
call it pork. Yeah.
to understand,
Yeah.
pork is from the pig.
Yes. Yes. But you don't say eating the pig. You say eating the pork.
I say for the animals, if someone says beef, I say cow, to remember.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay.
Forget. Yeah.
That's good. Okay. No
So-
problem.
So if we if we are doing a practice, whether it's not eating pork or not putting on jewelry or something,
Yeah.
it's very important to understand why you have this
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so it's for what I've noticed. I have a friend who is working in a butchery place.
By the way, you're not a vegan, are you?
No,
You're not. You vegetarian?
I
Do you eat
at
meat?
the moment, because I depend on people for food, I accept what they give me.
Oh, what do you mean you depend on people for food? Are you some sort of a monk?
I just live my life that I depend on.
You're a monk.
You're a monk.
Are you a monk? No, seriously. Are you a monk?
I meditate and walk and.
Oh, okay.
pray.
Well, you like Buddhism or something? Which ideology do you follow? Brother, you're blocking the cameras.
I've been inspired by. So I've read the Quran. I've read the Bhagavad Gita, the shorter version. I've read, I think, most of the Bible, but that was from childhood anyway. Had lots
Right.
of stories from it. I've read lots of different
Yeah.
books.
You read the Quran, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
I read it very seriously.
Nice.
And I've read Buddhist texts, and I found that the specifically about suffering, what they talk about Buddhism and suffering, I
In
found
Buddhism?
very interesting.
In
Yeah, they
Buddhism,
have like
yeah.
4 points about suffering, called the 4 Noble Truths. I find that very interesting to follow in my meditation, because it's not saying you have to believe this or not. Like, it's just, you have some suffering in your life. I have.
So what are the 4 points?
The first point is that there is suffering.
Yes, we know that.
Then that there is an origin of suffering, which is hanging on to desire. And then that there is a way out of, like an end of suffering, where you let go of this, like the habits you were talking about, or the desires that stop you. There's an end of suffering. And the 4th one, that there is a way out of suffering, which involves wisdom, morality, and concentration.
Okay. Sorry, when you say end of suffering would be death, at least in this world.
So that can be an understanding, but I think when you're alive, you can be totally at peace and still have lots of pain, but not suffer.
Yeah, but pain is part of suffering.
I think suffering
You
is
cannot-
how you take pain.
Yeah, but you can handle the pain, but it's still suffering. So, for example, maybe your threshold is higher for pain, but if you are in pain, then that is still suffering.
For example, you lose somebody that you love, they die.
Yeah.
Maybe because of your personal relationship to what is, you decide that you don't decide, but you can let your grief go, because you think, now my mother or my
Yeah.
inshallah,
You get over
my
it.
friend, they are happy because they are where they are and they are closer to our source. So you get over it, you let go, you are at peace. Somebody else, they lose their loved one, but they do not have.
I see what you mean. Hanging on to the grief.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that is one way of. It is how you manage grief, I guess.
Yes.
Different people manage it different ways. I understand, but still, because when you said end of suffering, I meant all your life, not just letting go of one grief. Because you see, it doesn't matter how good a person you are, how devoted to God you are,
Oh, you
how much
meditate a whole life.
exactly how much you meditate. So this is something that we see as part of your life. Is you'll have ups and downs.
Yes.
Yeah?
That's true.
Yeah.
But you can be at peace within yourself with the ups and downs. So everything can be a disaster.
Yeah.
Your hand can be cut off tomorrow. Everybody, as long as they're alive, they can have quite big pain.
Yeah.
But how you are with that cut
How you deal with it. Yeah.
is very different.
Absolutely.
So that's just the
And what was the last point? The fourth one?
The 4th one is that there's a way out of suffering, and the way is, so the 3rd was just that the suffering ends.
Yeah, but we qualified that, but let's move
Yes.
on. Yeah.
So the 4th one is the way out of suffering, which is with wisdom, morality, and concentration.
Right. Who decides what's moral or immoral?
No, then that's then so
Is it subjective or is it objective?
well, do you know this thing you talked about?
Yeah, the fitra.
The fita. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Okay. That is in us. That is a good indicator. If you've lost your fita for some reason,
Fitra.
fitra,
Yeah.
then you can sometimes, if you imagine you have like a 3-year-old holding their hand or so, it's useful to be a parent actually, I imagine. I'm not a parent
Okay.
physically.
I am actually, so I know.
So maybe it's useful to have children because you can see through their eyes and you think,
Yeah.
even if you cannot find your fitra, you see, this is not quite right for
But
my child.
would you say it's subjective? For example, good and bad is subjective for people, isn't it? What might be good for you might be bad for someone else.
But if you consider the whole of life, so if
You know, earlier I asked you if you were a vegan or vegetarian. So a vegan and vegetarian, they would be completely frowning upon anyone who eats meat.
yes,
Yeah? So
I have been vegetarian like 10 years in my life.
I know, but you still eat meat, don't you?
Now I eat meat.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So someone who looks at your lifestyle and your dietary habits, they're going to be appalled by it. You see what I mean? So what is good for you right now, because you need nutrition, might be completely different to another person's view who is against your lifestyle and the way you consume your food. That's why I'm saying, look, if things are subjective, then humanity will always be divided, isn't it?
But
Because-
for example, this is dividing humanity now because you say, okay, he's the son of God, he's not the son of God. I don't think at all this is the problem because we have to come into ourselves and find our own relationship with it. And then whatever happens, other people believe, it doesn't so much matter. But that's the divide.
So you're saying the same thing.
I
You're
believe-
saying the same
I
thing
believe-
because what you're doing is you're saying, okay, this is my subjective view. I'm going to stick to my ideology and I'm going to live my life. But what you're doing, just like your dietary needs.
Not stick, because
Yeah. Sorry, is it okay if you go a bit distant because I think it's trying to not capture you in the video?
I'm not trying to stick to anything. I'm trying.
You're sticking to your ideology.
But for example, I told you I was vegetarian before.
No, I'm talking about vegetarian. I'm talking about your beliefs.
But I'm
Your
saying
beliefs.
But my belief was that killing animals bad, and then it evolved.
No, no,
and
I'm talking about your beliefs in God.
this
oh.
is because of my belief.
Yeah, because earlier you said that God does nothing, remember? Now that is your belief,
Both. I said both.
but that would be contradiction and it can't be the truth.
That's why I was saying that for me, both of them are true at the same time.
Truth cannot be contradictory, I'm sorry.
But
I respectfully disagree because if anyone tells me that someone who is good is also evil, then the person doesn't know neither good nor evil.
you yourself told me that somebody can be good and do some evil.
Now I'm talking about God. In the context of God, if you're saying God is good, can God be evil?
Okay, but how do you do it in the context of people? You said some people can be good, but they have a good person. You said
Yeah.
person, but they can do evil actions. So what is the tipping point where they have this much good but that much evil? So it's okay, we call them good person, but now we call them that much bad, that much good. We call them bad.
Yeah,
person.
I think, look, this is something which is not really a problem. Because when you see someone living a gangster lifestyle and someone like a nun, for example, yes, I don't need to go and investigate their entire life to tell me who's good and who's bad. See what I mean? Some things are, obvious. So normally you would judge a person by their actions or by their words. See what I mean? You cannot know what's in the heart. Leave that for God to judge. We, as human beings, we judge by the apparent. What we can see, we are going to judge based on that. So if someone is, for example, tells me that, oh, they live a lifestyle of a nun, yes, during the day, but then when I see them at night, they might be going to a nightclub. You see what I mean? Then I will say that person's lifestyle is contradictory to their ideology. So we can only judge by the apparent, we cannot. But you see, God is different. God tells us who He is. We don't just imagine what God is.
I think in the Quran they say God is closer to me than
Your jugular vein.
my
Your
skin,
your jugular vein.
my jugular.
Yeah, which means by knowledge. Okay, so we don't believe that God actually is there. See what I mean? This is something by knowledge. That means God has knowledge of everything. In fact, there's a hadith which says the darkest night, in the darkest pit, in the blackest ant. Ah, good. You heard about that, mashallah. So yeah, this is Allah knows even what that ant is doing or saying. Yes. So we as people, we judge other people based on their actions and their words. We then say, okay, I can if Allah tells me that who He is, And then another, for example, Bhagavad Gita. Yes, take Krishna for example. Krishna, when he told Arjuna, Arjuna was hesitating to go to war with his cousins, the Kauravas. You remember that? I don't know if you remember it in your simplistic version. Yeah, because you said you read an abridged version of the Bhagavad Gita. But Bhagavad Gita is basically a dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna. Krishna is supposed to be this god of the Hindus. And when Arjuna was hesitating, because he was a good guy, maybe like you, he doesn't like to harm people, and especially his own cousins. And he was reluctant to go to war with him. You know what Krishna tells him? That it is your dharma, it is your duty as a Kshatriya, because he's from the warrior class, to take this war. Because here, remember I told you about the just war earlier? It's between the good and the evil. So when there's a just war, certain wars are justified. Yes, when there is oppression, when there is injustice, then those kind of wars, if you want to get rid of injustice and oppression, sometimes you have to go to war, unfortunately.
You said that, and then you gave the example of...
Yeah, sorry, just let me finish this point about Arjuna. So when Arjuna was reluctant, Krishna told him, it is your dharma, it is your duty to go to war. So you see what I mean? Even within Hinduism, when they don't believe, most Hindus today want to be vegans and vegetarians. Yes? But here Krishna is actually justifying killing of human beings. And this is related to the Mahabharata war. You heard of Mahabharata? Mahabharata. So it is basically one of the epics within Hinduism. They got two epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana. Both of them has war in it. Yes, both of them justify the war. In the case of Mahabharata, some Hindus say more than 4 million people died. And by the way, there were no conquerors at this time, so no outsiders. These are Hindus fighting each other. 4 million of them massacred each other like savages. So even vegetarians and vegans go to war. You see what I mean? This is the world we live in. But coming back to the principle of non-contradiction, you cannot say God is evil even if he gives you the instruction to go to war. You know why? Because that war he's instructed you is something which is justified in that scenario. How else?
If 4 million people die...
No, I'm not talking about Mahabharata. Sorry, I'm not talking about that.
Imagine.
I'm giving you a general view about a war. For example, if there is a small nation which has been oppressed by a larger nation, more powerful nation, as we see in Gaza today, being massacred and genocide and all that, yes, then it is justified in the case of God, because God, if you look at the Old Testament, which was given to the Jews, they were instructed to massacre the Canaanites. See what I mean? So justified wars were always there, but sometimes these wars were not really justified. Sometimes they would attribute this saying, oh, God told us to go and fight a war, when it was their own desire to go and fight a war because of their own benefits or whatever. But what I'm saying is that in the case of God, you cannot say that he's someone who is evil, because this war which you're saying is actually stopping the evil. What is the evil here? When a larger nation oppresses a smaller nation and commits evil against them, killing their women and children left and right with impunity, then God would intervene in such cases, and he would instruct people who follow him to go and rescue that nation. And this is what we see in the Old Testament all the time. Yeah.
In the wars, we are using bombs, and we are using like lots of different weapons and lots of and our own bodies to hurt other people. But we're using, like, we take the earth as if it's just for us to take.
How else will you stop someone like Hitler, who is coming to annihilate France and Britain?
Me personally.
Yes. What would you do when Hitler was here?
Yeah, on my knees, and I would pray, and I would say...
And he would shoot you in the head. Then what would you do? The nation is still suffering.
I would be at peace with myself, because I give all of my best. And how do you know he would shoot me? Because who I would be asking
because he did.
Protection would be love.
No, he did actually.
And if he did, then I would at least be in line with what...
I don't think you understand the thinking of a dictator. I don't think you understand it, because
you asked
if
me,
he
didn't say what was right or wrong.
No, but would you actually agree with the millions of people that he killed? You wouldn't agree, would you?
I don't think that.
Why do you
we need to kill each other?
No, I agree. We don't need to. That is why I gave you that ayah from chapter 5, verse 32. That if you kill one man unjustly, it is as if you kill the whole of mankind. But then there are evil people like Hitler who would commit atrocities, and that is the reason all the Europeans marched against him, and the Russians. They marched against him to get rid of that evil. Because if you let him continue his way, then he would have massacred a lot more people. How else? You can't just look. Sometimes you cannot rationalize with people who are irrational.
If someone is in front of me, right? If
Yeah.
someone is in front of me and they are actively hurting somebody, I can interfere as much as I can. Maybe I get killed, but I can interfere.
When you interfere, you mean you would use force?
Force.
Okay, that's exactly what I'm saying. So you're agreeing with me?
Not entirely.
I'm not saying
Depends on
unjustly.
how and what
Yeah,
and
yeah.
why.
Look, I'm not saying you just go and to war for no reason. I'm saying that's why I said just war is something that we have to take into account as a last resort. So if you have completed all the negotiations, talking about love, talking about empathy, once you have done all that, and they still go on massacring and killing people, then like you rightly said, sometimes force is necessary.